Hello everyone, welcome to the Menor Crafter. For several years, I've been planning on running a futuristic RPG game. I found out about TSR's old Alternity games several years ago, and I was really impacted by their Star Drive campaign set. The game system is very unique though, and I thought it wouldn't be appealing to the people I play with. So I've been on a long path trying to adapt some of the rules to Wizards' modern D20 system, which actually bought TSR and Alternity, and they even incorporated some of its content into their future D20 and Cyberscape rulebooks. Unfortunately, other hobbies got in the way, and I never had the chance to put such campaign in place. Nevertheless, I've always been searching for sci-fi miniatures, which are very difficult to get outside of Warhammer 40k or Star Wars. But now, with 3D printing, a whole new world of possibilities show up. I'm currently subscribed to both Loot Studios' SciFi bundle and also Cyberforge. Both of them have great designs and minis, and I've been printing and painting many of them. So I thought about starting a new series for sci-fi terrain. I always thought about the many possibilities this implies. Using new building materials, shapes, different ideas outside of fantasy, you name it. So I'm very excited to start with this industrial place. Let's hit the table! Before starting, I wanted to show you some of the materials I'll use in this build and future ones. I have several pieces of plastics, industrial packages, old toys from my son, Kinder Egg toys, etc. These are the plastic tops of some sparkling water bottles. Here are some deodorant tops with some cool shapes. This could play as an alien object or parts of a starship engine. Some small cars that could be part of some machinery with some modifications. This one has a cool scale and could be a hover bike. Here are some crates or more engines. This could work as a small machinery vehicle. And these wheels could make a great bigger hover transport, for example. Alright, as usual, I'm going with an MDF piece as the base. This one is 10 by 20 cm, and I'm marking the 25mm squares to have some reference on the build's space. I then cut a piece of foam with the same shape and sizes. I'm using a 3.5 cm high piece and marking the squares again. So we end up with a 4 by 8 square space. I cut a slice of 1 by 4 squares piece on one of the ends and will build the stairs in 2 of the squares. The steps will be between 5 and 10 mm wide and 5 mm tall. I mark them on the foam and then cut the excess with the hot wire. Then used the X-Acto knife to make some recesses in the grid lines. The main element of this build will be some soda cans I've always wanted to use. I got 2 different size ones, and I'm here making a draft of where the elements would go. I'll use the deodorant plastic bits on the top of the cans. Also trying different ideas on where other elements could fit. I start by sanding the soda cans so the paint would hold better afterwards, and I thought about including some metal straps around them. I took some measures and then cut some chipboard stripes. 3 for the tall can and 2 for the smaller one. I glued them with a sticky contact adhesive that holds well to the aluminum can. Don't think super glue, PVA or hot glue would be a good option in this case. I used some rubber bands to hold the chipboard while the glue dries. Been saving several cocktail plastic straws for a suitable time to use them in a build, and this is it. I thought about some tubes coming out from the tall can and going into the floor, so here testing some options. I glued the top of the can and then the tubes to the sides. Again, used some rubber bands to hold them in place. Added some plastic rivets to the chipboard stripes with superglue. Wanted to add some further details to these metal reinforcements, so cut additional very thin chipboard stripes and added them to each side with PVA. Cut and added additional chipboard reinforcements for the tubes. I curved them with the back of a brush or pencil before gluing. Here testing the layout again. I got this piece of broken track from my son and thought it could be a good piece of machinery. I cut a hole with the X-Acto knife so one of the tubes would fit in, and then a small piece of chipboard to cover the back. The concept of this build will be a small oil or fuel refinery. Old but not quite abandoned, so I thought about adding some sort of level measuring tube. I'll be using this plastic superglue tip as the base and a piece of sparkling water bottle as the main tube. Another element I wanted to include was a terminal that kind of controls the refinery. As this would be quite small, instead of crafting it, I 3D printed a free one from Thingiverse to be used as the keyboard and the screen. For the base though, I'll use part of a plastic card that came in a Kinder Egg chocolate. I sliced a bit so the 3D printed piece would fit well and then added it with superglue. Here checking the scale with a mini for reference. I used this plastic from the sparkling water bottle as another part of the refinery and cut a piece of the nose so it would fit between the cans. The idea is to leave a row of squares at the side to place minis. Then marked where the cans and part of the machinery would be placed in the foam. Also thought about adding a sewer-like exit to the side of the foam, under the cans. And I used the plastic top of a carton juice box as the tube, marking the shape and also carving a hole on the foam for this. Then cut out the face of the plastic top and I used a piece of mosquito mesh to cover the exit. Added it with superglue. Glued the main foam, the additional piece and the stairs to the MDF with PVA. Put some weight on top so it doesn't bend. To cover the bubble holes on the regular foam, I used some construction plaster which I added with a palette knife, making sure not to cover the carved lines of the grid. Also covered the stairs and the sides. While wet, I added some regular sand to provide further texture to the concrete and to work as dirt. Once dried, I reinforced the whole surface with some diluted PVA. Finally glued the structure to the base, including the terminal. Had an old rubber plug that would fit well atop the bigger can as a fumes chimney. Before priming the whole thing, I covered the cans with some construction plaster using a brush. This would provide more texture and the paint will hold better. Gave the foam base an additional layer of decoupage glue to seal it off from the primer. Cutting some plastic straws pieces to add to the front of the build and adding some connections with chipboard. I had this small plastic train from a bag of cheap toys and thought it could resemble a piece of machinery after I modified it a bit. Added some additional metal reinforcement planks to where the main tubing would go. First time I'm using a spray as primer since these cans are kind of expensive where I live. But I had this anti-rust one around, so thought about trying it. I went outside and painted the main build, the tubes and the waste exit. Then went over uncovered parts with some grey paint and I could start painting. My idea was to paint all tubing and parts of the machinery with brown to depict heavy rust, so started with the plastic tubes. For other parts in better condition, I instead went with gunmetal first and then some dry brush with brown. For the main tanks, I wanted them to have a weather look, so I first gave them an entire base of gunmetal and dry brushed the metal reinforcement parts. I wanted for the build to have bright colors, so decided with yellow and light aquamarine for the tanks. I painted them with a patina style so both the paint and the undermetal would show. The technique is very similar to a dry brush on the whole surface. Painted the top of the tall tank with black and then glued the deodorant part on the smaller can. After that, gave the entire concrete base a black wash and painted the terminal with white and light blue. Also painted the old train with red and some brown for rusty parts. Prepared a light brown wash and covered the tanks, machinery parts and tubes. Added a little bit of PVA to the wash so the paint would hold better to recesses and edges. I really like the rust effect the paint has when the wash dries. Did additional passes, especially on the tubes. Then used some brown dry brush for the dirt on the concrete base and the stairs. Glued the tubes in place and also painted the fumes chimney black. Added further washes on the tubes. For the level measuring tube, I first glued it to the base. I didn't want to go with the usual bright green toxic waste for this build, and instead thought about using a bright pink, bubblegum-like color to depict oil or fuel. I prepared some 2-part epoxy and added a fair amount of paint to it. Wanted to add a big pool next to the tanks, depicting a fuel leak, which I added with help of a toothpick and a popsicle stick. Also filled the level measuring tube and the waste exit. I then thought of making some additional pools of fuel I could place anywhere, so dropped some resin in a plastic sheet I could remove it from afterwards. I cut a small piece of wire and removed the copper inside. Painted it red and then glued it between the terminal and the machinery at the front. Removed some of the paint to make it look better. Then did the same with other thinner cables. Added a gunmetal painted piece of chipboard to the top of the level measuring tube and then used an old earphone piece for more detail. I also painted it gunmetal and added rust effect. I thought about adding an additional chimney on the small tank, so used another old and broken earphone. Primed it, painted it black and added some rust wash. Then glued it to the can. For final details, I added some printed warning signs with PVA and decoupage glue. Let's take a look now at our first industrial sci-fi terrain. I'm really happy how this first build turned out and excited to keep building more. I've got many materials, plastic pieces and ideas I would like to try. I hope you enjoyed the video and can get inspiration to build your own. Hit the like button if you did. Remember to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. Follow the Facebook and Instagram pages for additional pictures. I'll see you in the next craft.